Kale's chest tightened. He realized in that moment that the loneliness he had carried for so long was not a sentence. It was a wall he had built around himself, one he was only now beginning to lower. He looked into her eyes, and he saw not judgment, not pity, but something far stronger: understanding, trust, and an invitation to share his heart. "I don't know if I deserve this," he said, voice trembling slightly. "To be seen, to be understood. I've always been the one who protected others, never expecting anyone to protect me." Lyra smiled softly, her eyes reflecting the moons above. "You deserve it, Kale. You've always deserved it. And now, maybe it's time you let someone in." The wind swirled around them, carrying with it the quiet hum of the palace gardens. For the first time in his life, Kale did not feel the crushing weight of solitude. He felt connection, fragile yet powerful, like the first crack of sunlight through storm clouds. He realized that strength was not only in battle, it was in trust, in letting someone see your true self, in allowing another soul to walk beside yours, under the twin moons. Kale and Lyra stood together, hands brushing, hearts opening, and a silent understanding forming between them. The lonely warrior had found someone who truly heard him. The princess had found someone who could fight, protect, and most importantly, feel with her. And for the first time in his life, Kale believed that he might not be alone ever again. The calm that followed the last battle was fragile, like glass barely held together. Kale had grown used to long hours of patrolling, but he could feel the tension returning to Zephyra. The scouts brought news that froze his blood. The marauders were coming back, larger and more determined, armed with weapons designed to break through the palace's defenses. This time, there would be no second chance. Kale prepared quickly, sharpening his sword and inspecting every barricade, every turret, every shield generator. Soldiers moved around him, tense and alert, looking to him for guidance. But Kale knew that even the best soldiers, the strongest weapons, might not be enough. The marauders were relentless, and the drones they carried were faster and smarter than before. Lyra joined him, her face calm but determined. "Kale," she said, "we must fight together. This is no longer just about defending the palace. This is about surviving, about protecting what we care about." Her voice carried a quiet strength that steadied Kale's nerves. She had grown from a silent observer to a strategist, a partner in battle, and he trusted her implicitly. The marauders arrived under the cover of a dark storm. Lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating their sleek ships and glowing drones. Kale met them at the palace gates, every swing of his sword cutting through the first wave of attackers. His muscles ached, his lungs burned, but he did not falter. He fought not for glory or duty, but for the life of the princess who had come to mean more to him than he could put into words. Suddenly, a massive drone broke through the defenses. Its energy cannon aimed directly at Lyra. Kale saw it in an instant. Without thinking, he threw himself in front of her, taking the full blast across his chest. The force threw him across the courtyard, and pain exploded through his body like fire. His vision blurred, and he lay on the cold stone, gasping, fearing that this would be his end. Lyra screamed, rushing to his side, but her voice did not weaken his resolve. Through gritted teeth and burning pain, Kale struggled to his feet. "Stay back," he shouted. "I can handle this." Her eyes narrowed, but she trusted him. He could see the determination there, and it gave him strength. Slowly, painfully, Kale raised his sword. He dodged, struck, and used every ounce of skill and experience he had. The drone faltered under his relentless attacks, sparks flying from its circuits as he delivered blow after precise blow. Finally, with one last surge of strength, Kale shattered the drone into pieces. Breathing heavily, he turned to see Lyra approaching, her face streaked with tears, but her gaze steady. "Kale, you can't keep doing this alone," she said softly. He shook his head, a small, exhausted smile forming. "I wasn't alone," he said. "You were here. You've always been here." In that moment, Kale realized something profound. Strength was not just in the sword or the body, but in the bond between two people willing to face danger together. Lyra had fought in her own way, guiding defenses, making decisions, and never once letting fear control her. Together, they had saved the palace, saved the soldiers, and saved each other. As the storm cleared and dawn's light broke through the clouds, Kale and Lyra stood side by side, bruised, bloodied, but alive. For the first time, Kale felt a sense of peace he had never known. The lonely warrior had found someone who would face danger with him, who would see his pain, his courage, and his heart. And Lyra understood in a way that no one else could. That bravery was not only about swinging the sword, it It was about standing up, even when the world tried to break you. And knowing someone would stand beside you through it all. Cale looked at her, exhaustion and relief mixing in his gaze. "We made it," he whispered. "Yes," Lyra said, taking his hand gently. Together. For the first time, Cale realized that the battles he had fought were not just about survival, they were about connection. Trust, and the quiet courage of letting someone in. The first light of dawn spilled across Zephyra, painting the jagged mountains and crystal towers in soft gold. The storm had passed, leaving only the quiet hum of the palace and the distant chirping of alien birds. Cale walked through the gardens, his armor still scratched and bloodied, but his steps were steady. For the first time in years, he felt a sense of calm. A rare peace that had nothing to do with battle or duty. Lyra joined him, her flowing gown catching the sunlight, her eyes reflecting the twin moons fading from the sky. She walked beside him, not behind or ahead, but shoulder to shoulder, sharing the path as equals. The palace had survived. The marauders had been defeated, and for once, Cale felt that the danger that had defined his life no longer ruled it. "You fought like no one I have ever seen," Lyra said quietly, her voice carrying the weight of admiration and something deeper. Cale shook his head with a small smile. "No," he said. "We fought together. You saved the palace as much as I did. You've always been stronger than I thought." Lyra looked at him, her gaze steady and warm. "And you've always been brave, Cale. But bravery isn't just about fighting. It's about seeing someone else, understanding them, and trusting them enough to stand beside them. You taught me that, even without knowing it." Cale felt a lump in his throat. For years, he had carried the burden of solitude, thinking that to survive, he had to be invincible, untouchable, and completely alone. Yet here he was, side by side with someone who had seen him, the real him, and accepted him. His heart, once guarded by iron and steel, felt strangely light. They walked in silence for a while, letting the sounds of the palace and the gardens fill the space between them. Cale glanced at Lyra and noticed something he had never seen before. Vulnerability. Not weakness, but a quiet openness, the kind that came from knowing someone trusted you completely. It struck him that their bond had grown not from orders or duty, but from understanding and shared experience, forged in the heat of battle and strengthened by trust. Finally Cale spoke, his voice soft but certain. "I never thought I'd find someone who truly hears me, who sees me, even when I'm at my weakest." Lyra's fingers brushed against his, and she smiled faintly. "You don't have to face the world alone anymore. We face it together." The words resonated deep in Cale's soul. For the first time, he realized that humanity's greatest strength was not simply courage in battle or skill. With a sword, it was the capacity to connect, to care, and to trust another soul with your life and your heart. Lyra had shown him that strength could be gentle, patient, and profound. Cale looked at the palace walls, the towers gleaming in the morning light. This place, once a symbol of duty and isolation, now represented hope, protection, and unity. And standing beside him was someone who embodied that same hope, not just a princess, but a partner, a friend, a kindred spirit. "I never imagined," Cale began, then paused, searching for the right words. "I never imagined that someone like you could see me. And not just see me, understand me, and care." Lyra's smile widened, her eyes shining. "I always did. I just waited for you to realize it too." The wind shifted, carrying the scent of the crystal gardens and the distant mountains. Cale felt a warmth in his chest, a quiet fire that was not fear or anger, but something far more powerful, belonging. For the first time, he did not feel the crushing weight of solitude. He had someone to share the burdens, someone to trust, and someone who would walk beside him through any storm dot as they stood together. Gazing at the horizon, Cale knew that their story was only beginning. They had faced death, danger, and loneliness, and had emerged not only alive, but stronger, united, and profoundly changed. In that moment, he understood the truth that had always been just out of reach. Being human meant more than surviving battles. It meant having the courage to open your heart and letting someone see the real you. And for Cale, the lonely warrior of Zephyra, that realization was everything. Under the soft glow of dawn, Cale and Lyra stepped forward, side by side, ready to face whatever came next. Together, they were not just a warrior and a princess. They were a force, united in courage, trust, and the quiet, unstoppable power of humanity. The twin suns of Zoria Prime burned fiercely in the sky, casting sharp golden light over the alien capital. From her high throne, Queen Althara observed the approaching figure with a mixture of curiosity and annoyance. A single human ship had appeared out of nowhere, streaking across the atmosphere like a falling star. It was unlike any other species she had encountered. Humans were fragile, unpredictable, and often reckless. Yet this one. There was something different about him. Something in the calm way he moved made her chest tighten. An unfamiliar sensation she had not felt in centuries of ruling. The air around the palace shimmered with tension as the human descended. The enormous platform of polished crystal reflected the sunlight in dazzling patterns, and the alien guards bristled, ready to strike at the first sign of aggression. But he did not raise weapons. He did not shout or demand. He simply walked, each step deliberate, measured, and quiet, yet somehow filled with authority. His dark eyes scanned the towering columns and intricate carvings of her palace, yet they betrayed neither fear nor awe. The human's presence was like a calm storm, unsettling yet magnetic. Queen Althara leaned forward on her throne, her long spindly fingers curling around the armrests. She had ruled her empire for more than 4 centuries, and she had never seen a being like this. Most aliens, even the strongest warriors of her empire, would kneel immediately before the throne, recognizing their inferiority. Not this human. He walked as if he belonged, as if the palace itself had been waiting for him. She felt a prickle of unease in her chest. Was it possible that this fragile creature could truly challenge her? The human finally stopped at the center of the crystalline platform. A soft wind from the twin suns brushed his face, ruffling his simple clothes, yet he remained completely composed. The guards tensed, weapons glowing with energy, ready to strike at her command. The human lifted his head, and his eyes met hers. There was no fear, no arrogance, just clarity and focus, a deep understanding of the moment that made even the queen's experienced heart skip a beat. "Why have you come to Zoria Prime?" she asked, her voice calm but layered with authority. Her words echoed through the hall, a reminder of her power. The human paused, tilting his head slightly, as if weighing the meaning of her question. Then, in a voice that was soft yet firm, he said, "I have come to stop what you cannot see yet. To prevent what may destroy everything you call your empire." The queen's eyes narrowed. None of her spies or informants had reported any such threat. And yet, there was something in his tone, something undeniable, that made her heart beat faster. The room seemed to quiet around them. Even the humming of the palace's energy fields dimmed, as if the building itself was holding its breath. She motioned her guards forward. Blades of energy extended, crackling with deadly potential. But the human did not flinch. He stood his ground, shoulders straight, eyes unwavering. And then, in a movement so subtle it was almost imperceptible, the very ground beneath the guard's feet shifted. Energy radiated from the human, a faint pulse that made the crystal platform vibrate. The queen's guards stumbled, their weapons trembling in their hands. Althara realized something shocking. This human. He was not afraid. Not because he was reckless, but because he possessed a strength she had never seen before. It was not raw force like the berserkers of her empire. It was something deeper, something that defied her understanding. A quiet, controlled power that seemed to bend reality around him without a single outward gesture. For the first time in centuries, Queen Althara felt a flicker of uncertainty. Her advisors whispered warnings she barely heard. Her throne felt heavy beneath her as she leaned forward, trying to assess the impossible. The human was standing in her palace, unarmed, unafraid, and somehow, he was already winning. The suns of Zoria Prime reflected in his eyes like twin beacons. And in that moment, Queen Althara realized that this human was not just a visitor. He was the beginning of a force she could neither predict nor control. And for the first time, the alien queen felt fear. The air inside the palace thrummed with energy. Every alien guard, every crystal column, even the faint hum of the palace itself seemed alive, drawn into the tension between Queen Althara and the human who dared to walk unafraid into her domain. The queen's eyes narrowed, her mind racing with centuries of strategy, conquest, and careful control. She had faced warlords, rebellions, and alien invaders, yet nothing had ever made her pause the way this human did. He radiated a quiet certainty that unsettled her to her core. "Why have you come?" she repeated, her voice echoing across the hall. "Do you not understand the danger you place yourself in? One wrong move, and this will be the end of you." The human lifted his gaze, unwavering, and for a moment, the world seemed to stop. The sunlit crystals reflected in his eyes, but there was no fear, no hesitation, only calm determination. "I understand," he said softly, yet every word carried weight that seemed to press against the walls. I also understand what you cannot. Your empire is powerful, but it is built on fear. That fear will destroy you if it continues. I am here to change that. The queen's tentacles twitched in irritation. Change? A human, a creature she considered fragile, dared to lecture her about leadership? She raised her clawed hand, sending a ripple of energy that surged outward like a warning. The guards stiffened, ready to attack at a moment's notice. The human, however, remained motionless. He did not step back. He did not show fear. Instead, a subtle hum began around him, as if the very air recognized his presence and bent to his will. Stand down, he said quietly, and the sound carried a strange authority. The guards paused, weapons wavering. One of them tried to lunge forward, but the floor beneath him seemed to rise subtly, tipping him off balance. The queen froze. Was this possible? The human had not touched a single weapon, yet her elite warriors were faltering before him. You rely on fear, the human continued, stepping forward just a pace. But power is more than strength. It is restraint. It is courage. It is knowing when to protect, not destroy. That is why I am here. That is why I cannot fail. His voice was calm, but it carried an unshakable force. Even the queen felt it, deep in her chest, pressing against her pride. Her centuries of dominance. Althera's heart quickened. She had trained herself to never be intimidated, to never feel uncertain. And yet, as she looked at him, she felt a ripple of doubt creep in. Her palace, her throne, her empire, all of it seemed fragile in comparison to the quiet, unyielding presence of this human. The air itself seemed to bend toward him, and the crystal walls hummed as though in acknowledgement. Do you think you can stop me with words alone? She demanded, trying to regain control. Her claws glowed, sending arcs of energy that would have disintegrated any ordinary creature. But the human did not flinch. Instead, he raised his hand slightly, and the energy shifted. It did not harm, it did not redirect, it simply stopped. The arcs dissipated mid-air, harmless and bending away from him as if guided by some invisible force. A murmur ran through the palace. Her advisors exchanged worried glances. No human or any creature they knew could have done that. None had survived her palace's defenses intact. None had even come close. Yet here he was, standing calmly, eyes steady, defying everything she had taught herself to believe about strength. Althera realized something terrifying. This human was not just brave. He was something more. Something she had never seen before. And if she underestimated him, her empire could fall. Her voice softened slightly, not in fear, but in a cautious curiosity. Then, if you are not here to die, what are you here for? The human smiled faintly, the expression gentle but unshakable. To prove that one being, one heart, can change the course of even the greatest empire. And with that, the first ripple of true confrontation began. The palace, the queen, the human, they were all on the edge of a storm that none could predict. The tension in the palace had reached a breaking point. Queen Althera's guards, the finest warriors of her empire, had never hesitated in the face of any enemy, but this human had already unsettled them without striking a single blow. They stood in rigid formation, plasma blades glowing ominously, ready to obey her command. The queen's claws flexed with authority. "Attack," she ordered, her voice echoing like rolling thunder. The squad surged forward, their movements swift and precise. Energy blades sliced through the air with deadly intent, sparks flying as they aimed to strike the human down. But the human did not flinch. He simply stepped aside, or rather, the attack seemed to miss him entirely, as though guided by some unseen force. One by one, the warriors stumbled, tripping over the floor as if the crystals themselves had shifted beneath their feet. His movements were subtle, almost imperceptible, yet perfectly timed, and the guards could not comprehend what had happened. Queen Althera's heart raced. She had built an empire on discipline, on control, and her warriors were unmatched in skill. And yet, this human was bending reality without any weapon. The air around him shimmered faintly, energy flowing outward in soft waves, affecting even the guard's stance. For the first time, the queen realized she was witnessing something she could not fully understand. One warrior lunged, swinging his blade with all his strength. The human raised his hand casually, and the energy seemed to fold around him, redirecting the strike harmlessly to the side. Another tried a spinning attack, only to find himself frozen for a heartbeat. His movements slowed as if the very laws of motion had been altered. The palace echoed with the sounds of frustrated grunts and the metallic clash of bent weapons. Althera felt a strange sensation. she had not known in centuries, all mixed with fear. This human, so small and seemingly fragile, had already outmatched her elite warriors without shedding a single drop of blood. "Impossible," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of energy that now filled the hall. Yet it was true. Each warrior, skilled beyond imagination, had failed to touch him. Their blades bent, their stances faltered, and their confidence cracked. The human's expression remained calm, almost serene. He did not appear to gloat or celebrate. He simply observed, his dark eyes steady and focused. Every movement he made, every subtle gesture, radiated control and purpose. He was not fighting out of anger or pride. He was fighting because he had to, and because he understood something deeper, a truth that even the queen had long ignored. Althera's claws twitched, and she took a step forward. If her soldiers could not stop him, perhaps she could. She projected a pulse of energy directly at him, a wave so powerful it could have shattered walls. The human tilted his head slightly, and the energy bent around him, flowing harmlessly across the floor, as if guided by invisible hands. The queen's eyes widened. Even she could feel the magnitude of his power. This was no ordinary human. For a moment, the palace was silent except for the faint hum of energy. The guards froze, uncertain what to do next, and Althera realized that her authority alone might not be enough to control the situation. She felt a flicker of fear, a almost forgotten sensation. How could one fragile creature wield such force without destroying everything? The human finally spoke, his voice calm yet carrying a weight that made even the queen listen. "I do not wish to destroy. I wish only to stop what is wrong. I fight not to conquer, but to protect." His words resonated in the hall, striking deeper than any weapon. The queen's heart thumped in her chest, torn between disbelief and a grudging respect. For the first time in centuries, Queen Althera realized she might not be the strongest being in the universe. And that realization, terrifying and exhilarating, marked the true beginning of the human's challenge. The echoes of the battle still rang in the grand hall, but now a strange stillness had settled. The human stood at the center, unscathed, his dark eyes calm and focused. The guards had retreated, their confidence shattered, unsure how to even approach him. Queen Althera's chest heaved as she watched him. He had defeated her elite warriors without breaking a sweat, but now something even stranger was happening. The air around him shimmered, faint but undeniable. Light bent subtly around his figure, and the crystals of the palace walls seemed to vibrate with an energy that was not of this world. Althera raised a claw, ready to strike again, but the pulse of power from the human made her hesitate. The ground beneath her feet trembled lightly, the floor's smooth surface rippling as though it were liquid. Her eyes widened in disbelief. "What are you?" she whispered, almost to herself. Her voice trembled with a mixture of fear and awe. The human did not answer immediately. He closed his eyes, and the hum of power grew, filling the hall like a living presence. Slowly, the crystalline floors began to rise, twisting and floating in the air, as if obeying some unseen command. Pillars bent slightly, and energy streams that powered the palace flickered, responding to his presence. Even the walls themselves seemed to lean closer, captivated by the force radiating from him. Althera's mind raced. She had ruled for centuries, mastering every form of power she knew. She had commanded armies that could level planets and used energy that could reshape continents. And yet here was a human frail in appearance, unarmed, seemingly ordinary, bending the very fabric of her palace with a thought. She felt the weight of centuries of arrogance crumble in a heartbeat. The human opened his eyes, and Althera caught the depth of emotion there. There was no malice, no prideful arrogance, no hunger for conquest. Instead, there was resolve, clarity, and a strange, undeniable warmth. He spoke softly, and yet his voice resonated through the palace, carrying a force that no walls or barriers could contain. "I do not seek to destroy," he said. "I seek to stop what is wrong. Your empire is strong, but it is built on fear. Fear cannot last forever. Change cannot be forced through intimidation. It must be guided." The queen felt her heart tighten. His words cut deeper than any weapon, exposing truths she had long buried. Her empire had survived for centuries because of fear and obedience, but she had never considered the power of courage and conviction, of a single being standing firm against the tide of centuries. That strength, she realized, was far more dangerous than any army. The human moved a step forward, and the floating crystals shifted gently, forming a semi-transparent barrier around the queen's throne. She felt the walls of her palace respond to him as if the building itself acknowledged his authority. The energy he radiated was not just physical, it was emotional, moral, almost spiritual. Every nerve in Althara's body told her that this was no ordinary being. Her advisors whispered in panic, but she silenced them with a flick of her claw. She did not want their words. She needed to understand this human herself. The room pulsed with energy, and even the twin suns outside seemed dimmer, as though the human's presence absorbed the light around him. Althara felt fear, awe, and a strange curiosity swirling together. Finally, she spoke, her voice steady despite the trembling in her chest. "If what you say is true, if your power is more than what I have ever seen, why have you come to me? Why face me directly?" The human smiled faintly, his gaze unwavering. "Because I must," he said simply. "Because standing for what is right sometimes means facing those who seem invincible. And because hope, no matter how small, can change everything." Queen Althara realized with a shiver that her empire had never faced anything like this. The human's power was not just strength, it was purpose. And purpose, she knew now, was far more dangerous than any weapon she could wield. Queen Althara's claws trembled as she regarded the human standing before her. Every instinct she had honed over centuries screamed at her to attack, to assert her dominance, to crush this fragile creature who had turned her palace into chaos without lifting a weapon. Yet she could not move. Something in the human's calm presence held her in place, as if invisible chains had bound her own pride. The human took a slow step forward. His gaze did not waver. It bore into her with a strange mix of warmth and resolve. "I do not fight for power," he said softly, yet his voice resonated across the hall. "I fight for hope. I fight for life. I fight for those who cannot defend themselves." Each word struck her like a blade, not one that cut flesh, but one that pierced deep into her chest. The weight of his conviction made her pause, her centuries of confidence shaken. Her throne felt suddenly heavy beneath her. For centuries, she had ruled through fear, commanding obedience with the force of her armies. And yet here was someone who did not need armies, who did not need fear. He had toppled her guards, bent her palace itself, and yet had not caused harm. His strength was different. It was moral, emotional, and terrifying in its purity. Althara realized with a sinking feeling that she had never faced true strength before. "Why?" she demanded, her voice shaking despite her efforts. "Why do you do this? You are alone. You are weak. You could be destroyed in an instant." The human took another step, closing the distance between them. His presence filled the space, pressing against her with a force she could not resist. "Because I have to," he replied, his eyes never leaving hers. "Because I cannot stand by while cruelty rules. Because even one heart, even one person willing to fight for what is right, can make a difference. That is power. That is strength." Althara felt a strange heat rise in her chest. She had always believed that strength came from armies, weapons, and domination. She had never considered that courage, empathy, and conviction could wield a force greater than any blade. The human was teaching her a lesson she had ignored for centuries, that true power did not lie in fear, but in purpose. Her guards shifted nervously behind her, whispering to each other, but she silenced them with a gesture. She did not want their advice, their fear, or their panic. She needed to understand this human herself. He was standing before her, unarmed, yet he radiated a presence more commanding than any general she had ever known. The human stepped closer, and she felt the energy in the room pulse with his heartbeat. "You have ruled for centuries, Queen Althara," he said softly, yet firmly. "And you have done much, yes. But your empire is built on fear. Your people may obey, but they do not respect. They do not trust. That is a weakness you have ignored for too long." Althara's breath caught. His words were not disrespectful. They were a mirror held up to her soul, reflecting truth she had long denied. She had ruled an empire, yet she had never ruled herself. She realized now that the fear she commanded from others was a reflection of the fear she had hidden inside.